Hi, welcome to Inside the Investigations. Today we have our senior investigative producer, David Barrere, with us. David, how are you?
I'm doing great. Thanks for having me.
Well, thank you for being here. So let's jump right in. For years, you've reported on the long wait list to get into Texas's mental health hospitals and how that wait list impacts our criminal justice system. This week, the state auditor's office released a pretty big report giving us some insight and an update on the state's efforts to change that. Tell us, what did it say?
Yeah, so this audit has been a long time coming. It was created after a Senate bill last year that was passed asking for the state auditor's office to look into the competency restoration system in the state and examine any inefficiencies that came up. And so the results or the findings were mixed. On one hand, there were some positive things for the state to look at. For one, the wait list is trending down, so the amount of people on the wait list has been going or decreasing, and so the amount of time that they're waiting has also been going down. But to add a little context to that, the wait list was like extremely high before, so it is going down, and that's positive, but there's still a lot of people on it. At last count, I believe it was in August, there were over 1,700 people total waiting on it, and so that's a lot of people. But compared to about 2 years ago when there were 25 or more than 2,500 people, the situation has improved. So that's one positive thing, that some of the stuff that the state is doing is working to decrease the amount of people waiting, but they also found other problems with the system as well.
So, good news, the line essentially is less long, but still very long and still has an impact on those people on it. But you mentioned these other shortfalls. What are they?
Yeah. Yeah, that was a good way to put it. Good news is the line's shorter. Bad news is the line's still out the door. But the other things that are going on, for one thing, auditors found that people are cycling back and forth through the system, and so that's gumming up the works a bit. The auditors looked at a time frame of late 2018 or September 2018 to the beginning of 2024, and there were about 15,600 people that had been on the wait list in that time, and they found 10% of them, or more than 1,500 people, had been or were reoffenders. So that means that they were put on the wait list, and they left, and then they got new charges after that. And so that sort of multiple times cycling through is, they're not getting the job done. I guess you could look at it that way, not getting the help they need maybe the first time around. And so, in one case, auditors found an individual who appeared on the wait list 8 times, on five, including five misdemeanor, or I'm sorry, he had 8 different arrests. 5 of them were trespasses, and he went to the state hospital 3 separate times. So that's one thing. Another sort of way, excuse me, that people can cycle through is called decompensation. And so if someone waits in jail, then they get to the state hospital, they get their mental health restored, then they're sent back to jails to wait until their case can be resolved. But if they sort of spiral down into their mental health, gets worse while they're waiting in jail for their case to resolve, then they can be found incompetent to stand trial again. And so then they cycle through the system another time. And that's another problem that they found happening hundreds of times.
So it sounds like this report quantified this issue. It's telling us how often these folks are cycling in and out. But your reporting has highlighted this issue before, and I'm thinking of the Aiden Castaneda case specifically. Can you talk to us about what that looked like, what your reporting was then?
Yeah, Adan Castaneda was a Marine Corps veteran. He served in Iraq. He was a scout sniper, if I recall correctly. And he developed some some PTSD and some trauma, and when he came back, he struggled with mental health issues. And so he was arrested after an incident in 2011 where he shot a pistol at his parents' house, and nobody was injured, but he was charged with a lot of multiple felonies for that incident. And he experienced the same type of issue I just described called decompensation. And so he was cycling, this was in Comal County, and he was cycling back and forth between Comal County and the state mental hospital a couple times before his case was ultimately resolved. And just to clear up his case, he was found not guilty on most of the charges, or not guilty by reason of insanity, and he was ultimately released from custody, or later released from custody, and after being in the state hospital system and getting mental health care that he needed. His mom was always by his side advocating for him and very involved in his case and very helpful to Adon. And we've communicated with his mom a lot. Unfortunately, a lot of people don't have an advocate like that. So he was able to navigate the system more or less with the help of his mom. And she told me recently in an email that he's doing much better. But yeah, his case was sort of emblematic in our past reporting of this problem of people cycling through, and then the long waits and the problems that they can cause for people's cases and the justice system.
And you guys were able to, you mentioned that you keep up with him and his family and you're still talking to him. And I thought what was so interesting about the reporting on him specifically is that you were able to come back around and get his viewpoint on cycling in and out of the system. I want to show a portion of your reporting from back then.
I'm at San Antonio State Hospital. It's giving me insight. It's giving me time to reflect. It's giving me time to judge myself, time to think about my past, everything I've done, try to work on the future. For me, it's extremely important to stay on medication because it helps me, it helps take the edge off. It helps keep me stabilized. We've been having therapy for about 4 or 5 months already. That's been extremely beneficial to my mental health.
When we talked to your mother originally, we kind of talked about the time before when you were going between jail and a state hospital and kind of back and forth.
They'll say you're competent and competent, send you back and forth to jail, and the cycle work back and forth like purgatory. It's a loophole.
And David, such powerful reporting. I was watching it again this morning as we were kind of looking through what we were going to talk about today. And it was so good to hear from him on this experience. But update us on him specifically. He was ultimately found not guilty, right, on some charges?
Yeah, he was found not guilty on some charges and not guilty by reason of insanity on others. And he went back to a state hospital. I'm not exactly sure where he's living now. His mom told me he's doing much better. The last time we spoke with him, he was in San Antonio State Hospital getting mental health treatment. And so he was doing pretty well when we talked to him. He's written a bunch of books, actually, and he was working on dealing with his experiences.
So we know from your reporting and this audit how complicated and prolonged this process can be once someone's considered incompetent to stand trial and ends up on the wait list. But we also know that the man responsible for a violent shooting spree last December, in which 6 people were killed, has also just been considered incompetent to stand trial. How can you put this into context for us? What could this mean for his case?
So his case is paused indefinitely until his mental competency is restored. And so when he's found incompetent to stand trial, that's a pretty high bar for someone's mental health problem. You have to not be able to basically understand your attorney or participate at all in your own defense. And so he'll need to wait. We don't know who's on the state or on the wait list or not, or what wait list they're on or not. But given his charges, I would say most likely he's on the maximum security wait list, which is the longer one. And so he'll have to wait on that until he can be taken to a state hospital, and then they'll have to restore his mental competency. And there are times when that never happens. There are some people that they find are never likely to be restored, and they try and it just doesn't happen. But we'll have to wait and see how long it takes. And then once that is done, if they can restore him to competency, then he'll be returned to jail and his case will proceed. But in the meantime, there's no clock, time limit or set date for when this will be resolved.
Obviously, Shane James, he's facing very serious charges. Does the list consider the seriousness of the charges that the potential patient has? Could he potentially skip the line because the seriousness of his charges?
No, he can't skip the line. Everyone waits in line, and as far as I know, there's no movement really on who gets, once you're on it, moved up or down. There are some exceptions. Like in this audit, they found that if a court would failed to send the order to HHSC to get someone on the list in a timely manner, then when the order is sent, they could find where they would likely be in the line and get them there. But that's not really skipping ahead because the order should have been sent anyway. I guess I could see people arguing the other side of that too, which would be, people who have very non-serious crimes, non-violent crimes, maybe they shouldn't wait as long as others. But no, to answer your question, to my knowledge, there is no skipping ahead based on a charge.
Interesting. Okay. So for people who are being found incompetent and then end up on this list, is it possible that they would just be done with their sentence before even making it off the list? And if so, what happens?
Yeah, so that does happen. They call it a timeout, timed out. The person timed out of their charge, basically. And I think it happens more often to lower level offenses, maybe misdemeanors, where they were never going to spend more than maybe 6 months or so in jail. But the rule is that while you're waiting for a state hospital bed, they can't keep you in jail waiting longer than the maximum sentence of the charge that you're awaiting trial on. So when the hospital list gets so long that people are waiting for months and months, sometimes people reach the point where they've already sat in jail waiting for a state hospital bed as long as the maximum length of their charge. And so at that point, they're required to be let go. And the audit does mention that can happen, and they don't get any they don't get the mental health treatment that they actually needed.
That's unfortunate. So, okay, you've done a lot of reporting on this. I know in our newsroom, you're the expert that we run to when we want to better understand this system. Is there anything that came out of this report that surprised you or that, drew your attention because it wasn't something that you'd heard before?
A lot of the things were surprising. There were things that we investigated and tried to put a number on previously, but it was extremely difficult because the wait list is confidential, and to kind of reverse engineer who's on it or how long people have waited, you'd have to go to every single court and pull records, and it's kind of impossible for us to do that. I think one of the things that surprised us was that there were dozens of people who had died while they were waiting for a state hospital bed. I shouldn't say we were surprised. We were surprised at the number of them, and those are, tragic circumstances.
Okay. Well, this has been such a good conversation, and I'm glad that we were getting to get this in-depth look at your process and what you're still looking into. For those of you who are not familiar with the reporting that David and a lot of members of our team have done on this issue, I would encourage you to go to kxan.com under the Investigates tab. You can see David's article that published today, but you can also catch up on the Locked in Limbo series, which thoroughly explores this issue and I think has so many real people in it who you guys have somehow managed to talk to their family members and talk to them about what this actually looked like for them. So I cannot encourage you enough to look at this reporting. David, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me.